Hey everybody. Today we are going to be discussing the third and final branch of the United States government. This is the judicial branch. The judicial branch was created in Article 3 of the United States Constitution. So let's begin to examine some of the basics of this branch of government. So, who is in the branch? Well, the judicial branch of the federal government is made up of the Supreme Court and other federal courts. So, if you look at the diagram on the screen, you have the U.S. District Court, the U.S. Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. So these court systems have been put in place by the U.S. Constitution to settle arguments about national law. So they only deal with arguments over national law. So when you turn on the TV to Judge Judy, or maybe your parents get a speeding ticket and they have to go to court, which maybe or maybe not, I have gotten one. They do not go to any of these courts. They go to a local city or state court. And Judge Judy is a whole nother topic. But this system, this federal court system, was put in place to only settle arguments over national law. So the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the United States, that's why it is supreme, and then the ones underneath. And so what is the main power of the judicial branch? Well, the main power is to interpret the laws. So it's to interpret laws, determine their meaning, and to apply these laws involving these cases. So the main power is to interpret the laws and their meaning. So how is the federal judicial branch organized? Well, like I mentioned earlier, conflicts about national law begin in the lower courts, okay, but can be appealed if one side of the dispute remains unhappy. To appeal a decision made by a court, that means you want it to be reconsidered. You want the decision to be reconsidered. So, for example, there was a famous court case, a historic court case known as Brown versus Board of Education. And in this court case, they challenged the federal law that schools could be separate but equal. That means that as long as they're equal, you can have a school for only black children and a school for only white children. That's why it's called separate but equal. Now, do you really think it was separate but equal? No. So, a father of one of the students, last name Brown, challenged the school board of their local city, and it went, because it was a national law, it went to the U.S. District Court. And in the U.S. District Court, the judge ruled that it was okay. Separate but equal was okay. And Brown and his attorneys did not like that decision. So they appealed it. They wanted the decision to be reconsidered, and they appealed, or kind of like a plead. Like, you want help. You want it to be relooked at. So they appealed to the US Supreme Court, and the US Supreme Court took it as a case, and they decided that separate but equal was unconstitutional, or that it went against the Constitution. And so that's why today, separate but equal schools, segregated schools, where you have a school for black children and a school for white children, that is illegal because of this decision. So I want to go over that example to kind of show you the organization of the judicial branch. It is very unlikely that a case will go directly to the Supreme Court. It usually has to go through the organizational system of the federal court system in our judicial branch. So, like I talked about, the Supreme Court, it is called Supreme Court because it makes the final decision about an individual case. So if it makes it to the Supreme Court, if a case makes it there, then whatever decision is made is the final decision. Also, and this is interesting, if the Supreme Court does not decide to take a case, then whatever decision was made in the lower courts is also final. So the Supreme Court has a lot of responsibility when making decisions because they are the final decision makers. And the Supreme Court is made up of 9 justices. Justices are the judges. So if you look at the photo on the page, those are the 9 current judges or justices of the Supreme Court. The man in the middle, the center, is John Roberts. That is the Chief Justice, or the head of the Supreme Court. And then you have the 8 associate justices, are the other 8 justices of the Supreme Court. How are members selected? So how can you become a federal judge? Well, actually, the Constitution doesn't mention requirements. You know how I talked about like the requirements for a president? You have to be 35 years old. You have to be a natural born citizen, and so on. Well, the Constitution really doesn't give requirements to be a federal judge. But there are some standards that you have to meet based on previous decisions. But that's not the point. So how are members selected? So step one, you have to be appointed or chosen by the president. So the president has to choose you to be a federal judge. So what he does is when there's an opening, they usually make a list of possible replacements. And so it could be like lawyers, it could be lower court judges, it could be anybody in the court system already, and then the president appoints them to replace whoever was leaving as a federal judge. But step 2 is that the person the president chooses has to be approved by the Senate. So it's both branches of government have a say in if someone becomes a federal judge or not. The president appoints the new federal judge, but the Senate has to approve that person before they are allowed to take that position. And how long can one person be a federal judge? Well, they are appointed for life. So once they are chosen by the president and approved by the Senate, they are a federal judge for life. That means until they die, they retire, or they are removed by Congress or impeached by Congress because of something bad they did, such as a crime, a federal crime, such as corruption, or maybe they got paid to make a decision, paid off. So federal judges serve for life, which means until death, retirement, or impeachment. And what power does it have over laws? So what power does the judicial branch have over laws? And listen to me right now. This is a huge responsibility that the Supreme Court has. It can declare laws unconstitutional. That means unconstitutional means against the rules of the Constitution. And if a law is declared unconstitutional, it is illegal. The law is void. It can no longer be. So even if Congress passed it, and even if the president signed it into law, if the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional, then the law is illegal and it cannot be. Okay, so for example, if Congress passed a bill that all fifth grade students have to go to school 20 hours a day, and the president signs it because he's making America great again, starting with fifth grade, the Supreme Court could look at that law and say that it goes against the Constitution and the fundamental rights within the Constitution that a person has, the rights that a person has, even a child. So the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, can declare laws unconstitutional. And where do they meet? The Supreme Court meets in the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. Okay, so here's my discussion on the judicial branch of the United States government. Let me know if you have any questions. Now you can go complete the rest of your notes over the three branches of government.